This video is sponsored by Elements Photography magazine. I'd like to tell you a story which at first might seem unrelated, but bear with me and I'll explain how it's had a positive impact upon my enjoyment of nature, my view as a woodland photographer, and how it might change your experience of photography too. Now let me take you back to the 1980s, to a coastal village with cobbled streets and whitewashed cottages which overlooked a sheltered bay on the northeast coast of England. At low tide, shallow rock pools glistened in the sunlight and the submerged pebbles, shells and seaweeds were alive with colour. I carefully turned over rocks in the hope of spotting the orange armour of a hiding crab. Gently handling them, I'd admire all that intricate detail with that sense of childlike wonder which would help to pave the way for lifelong love of the natural world. I started secondary school in 1990, a time when we didn't have mobile phones and accessing the internet was extremely slow via a dial-up modem. We considered ourselves very lucky at school if our computer lesson was on the Amstrads instead of the old Acorn BBC computers. Growing up, yes, we had Segas, Amigas and Nintendo games consoles, but the excitement of running home from school was to play on our bikes, play in the park or go and explore in the local forest. I was probably too young to fully appreciate it at the time, but I was very fortunate to grow up with a small forest as my local playground. We spent countless hours building dens from fallen larch branches, each construction more elaborate than the last. We would disguise them with roofs made of thick beds of loam and needles and construct doors by tying branches together. Granted, we weren't always well behaved, we did some mischievous things too, we all do, but it was the building blocks to forging a more positive relationship with nature. Throughout most of the 90s, I enjoyed a passion for freshwater angling, which was as much about the magic of dawn at the water's edge as it was about simply making contact with an old, wise and often cunning carp. I remember climbing an old oak tree which leaned over the clear waters of the secluded, weed-choked lake. The elevated view with a pair of polarised glasses meant you could see through the reflections, and the hope was to spot your prize. Catching these fish was almost impossible, nobody else was trying, but seeing one magically appear and then mysteriously disappear was enough to prove that it was a dream worth chasing. In all my time of trying, I only ever caught one 24-pound carp, but what led to that moment was dozens of sunrises next to mist-shrouded pools, encounters with a hungry winter robin, watching the marching hares in the adjacent field, and many hours of chasing the impossible in the hope of holding that monster carp. It's only in more recent years that I started to recognise my personality threading through my hobbies. The imagined photograph is very much like that monster carp, the ultimate reward, and the time it takes to get there is inconsequential. There's no shortcuts, certainly none that wouldn't leave you feeling dissatisfied, and that's because you realise that catching that carp, it didn't really matter. What mattered was that I was there, I imagined, I wondered, and I had that childlike innocence to chase dreams. It's not just a fish, just like it's not just a photograph. It's how we get there and the experiences which shape us, our adulthood and our values. It's true, I love a good story. Sometimes it's someone else's story which inspires. It's a movie that stirs the imagination, your own story which can offer direction and acceptance, or tall, fantastical tales that let you escape. Let's face it, I could walk into the woods, take photos, tell you what settings I used, and that'll be that. However, I'm constantly being asked how I see in the woods, how I think, why I make the choices that I do. But these questions can't be answered with a simple formula, and top tips barely scratch the surface. Understanding what comes instinctively takes a little more consideration. The intention isn't to purposely sound fanciful, but to embrace my past and be thankful of a childhood surrounded by nature, and to appreciate that a certain degree of whimsical thinking is actually a blessing. The experience of woodland photography can be transportative, perhaps to your version of an enchanted world that you've read in a book or seen on screen. For me, it transports me back to being that curious boy who explored the forest, followed streams, built dens, and the dream chaser who imagined monster fish. Some of you may have had similar experiences to me. Others might be wondering what on earth this has to do with photography. Well, it was a few years ago that I started to become more consciously aware of this childlike state of imagination and wonder. Further back still, I recognised my personality threading through my hobbies and my propensity for craving the lasting rewards that I yielded from experiences and challenges rather than taking the easier option. And it was only a couple of years ago that I started to make sense of the correlation between this approach and what you might call the photographer's equivalent to the elusive big fish. There was an aha moment when I read, albeit briefly, about the theory of spotlight and lantern consciousness developed by Alison Gopnik. Now, I've mentioned this in passing before, but it's worth mentioning again within this context because it helps us to understand how our mindset can mean the difference between being a visual sponge or not being able to see the woods for the trees. So think of attention as light. And the shape of light and what it illuminates can be more like a spotlight or more like a lantern, and therefore determining where we place our attention. So I'll just quickly put up a comparison of spotlight and lantern consciousness on the screen now. So some of the characteristics of having a spotlight consciousness can mean shining a light on one idea, shutting out superfluous info, concentrated and methodical and egocentric. Whereas a lantern consciousness can mean lighting up everything around you, a sense of wonder, exploring without knowing, receptive and indiscriminate, and allocentric. Toddlers shine their awareness evenly, like a lantern, in all directions. This allows for lots of visual exploration, noticing details, and taking in all things equally. However, as we grow older, we learn to focus our awareness and adopt a spotlight consciousness. We use tried and tested ideas to help overcome challenges and focus our attention on one thing at a time. We become very good at focusing on the task in hand, but it becomes problematic if it pigeonholes us into a fixed way of thinking. Both forms of perception are equally useful. So the skill is being able to control, now you'll like this, your awareness aperture. A wider aperture to illuminate more of what's around you, and a narrower aperture to be more focused and clear. Now, I like Alison's description of what it's like to be a lantern consciousness baby. She said it's like being in love in Paris for the very first time after 3 double espressos. Now, that sounds quite overwhelming, but I think sometimes people find the complexity of woodland as overwhelming, so they might adopt a spotlight consciousness. They seek out that standout tree which grabs their attention and focus their efforts on that as their subject. And focusing on a standout tree can certainly help to distill a scene, but it might blinker us from potential distractions or other compelling details. So how might we go about widening our aperture of awareness? Well, you might start with spotting that standout tree, but then broaden your focus to your surroundings. Keep your focus soft while taking in all the other trees, plants, details, the light, shadow and colour. Don't become fixated on one particular element, but let your attention drift from one thing to another and observe. It's about moving from the seen to the seeing. It's about being softly fascinated by all the things that are easy and pleasant to look at. The key is balance and knowing when to narrow your aperture of awareness, set your boundaries and make the image, but that bit's up to you and your own intentions. Let me be perfectly clear, I've not studied psychology, I don't have all the answers, I'm just another guy trying to make sense of what I've experienced. You know, some days in the woods are incredibly immersive, other days I've cut short because I haven't quite hit the spot. But I felt it. It means something to me, so hopefully some of this will resonate with you. Any regular viewers know how much I love finding new woodlands. That's not because inspiration has run dry in other locations or I'm in need of new trees to photograph. It's because I want to be that kid again, shining a light on everything that's new, that childlike sense of excitement from seeing something for the first time. The photograph is the byproduct of that mental transportation, being engrossed by curiosity, not taking pictures, but being taken by everything that surrounds us. As adults, we're saddled with responsibility and stresses, so I say embrace your inner child, that part of you that never fully grows up. Revel in escapist fantasy and don't let your imagination be suffocated by reality. Sometimes we can feel defined by our routines, but I think we can all benefit by learning to give quality attention to things in nature. I'm pretty sure I've never accepted a sponsorship for a video before, and that's because I've never really felt like any of the offers have been a good fit for this channel. However, when Elements Photography magazine reached out, I instantly knew that it would sit well with my content and with videos like this in particular. Elements is a monthly digital magazine with over 100 pages of premium and exclusive content. It includes contributions from photographers who are true experts in their field, such as my good friend Rachel Talibart and favourites such as Charles Kramer. To complement the high standard of work included, the magazine has an elegant design with a clutter-free layout that prioritises fantastic imagery. Like this channel, they don't dwell on the technical details or top tips, but their articles offer a valuable insight into the approach of accomplished photographers that can be thought-provoking or spark something in your own creative direction. I highly recommend that you take a look. They offer both a quarterly subscription or an annual subscription, which includes special issues. For more information, please go to elementsphotomag.com and you can use the code SIMON15 for 15% off the annual subscription. Thanks again to Elements Photography magazine for sponsoring this video, and thank you to you for watching. Please leave a comment and consider sharing this video with your friends, and check out my website and Ko-fi page for ways to support this channel. Thanks again, and I'll see you soon.